You are listening to Beyond Believing. I am your host, Katie Ann. I am a certified life coach, and at the end of my show, I'll share more information about how I can help you one-on-one and how we can get in touch. All right, friends, welcome to episode 24 of Beyond Believing podcast, the third in my series of what I'm calling Blessing the Lives of Others. And today we're specifically talking about how we bless the lives of others through service and our struggle. I'm going to throw a little bit of a twist in here about this because I feel like there's a lot of thoughts about what it means to bless the lives of others through service. And I think it's pretty easily assumed that we know what it means when we say blessing the lives of others through our struggle. But I am wanting to share about how this is a blessing this divorce season to your children and to yourself and to those around you. And as I was thinking about this has just really been on my mind a lot of the things that I learned from my parents' divorce. As I started really thinking about this, I wanted to share the things that my parents taught me because I was just thinking about this specific season, and this last week has been a little bit of a struggle, and I felt really just disconnected, quite honestly. And one of the things that my mom used to say to me, my mom is a quote collector, and I inherited that trait from my mother. I'm not gonna lie. So when I say things that my mom has told me, it's kind of extensive. So something that she shared with me and shared often with us as her children came to my mind. And it just started me thinking about the things that I learned from my mom. And then I started thinking about the things that I've learned from my dad and comparing them. I just was overwhelmed with this really beautiful gratitude for both my mom and my dad, and a really deep appreciation and love and compassion for both of them. As I am in my own post-divorce season, I am having a very different perspective than I've ever had before to my parents in their post-divorce seasons. And I would say that I don't think either of my parents would say that they handled that post-divorce season really amazingly well. I always viewed that season for me and for my siblings as just really difficult, but also very impactful for my life and who I was shaped into because of their experiences. But looking now from this lens of being in the same situation that they each found themselves in, I feel like I see it all in a very different perspective. And I wanted to share that with you today because I recognize what a blessing each of their journey is to me today in my current journey. As I was thinking about how we take our struggle and our pain and our suffering, it can be used as a tool if we are willing and open to bless the lives of others. That sometimes we go through a struggle and a suffer because it allows us more compassion and empathy to help somebody else on that same struggle and on that same path further down the road. I hadn't really thought about it that way before, and the fact that like my parents, their struggle in their season as young, divorced, single parents, that it would bless me the way that I feel like it has lately. And so I really wanted to challenge you, I think, in your own season right now to maybe just step outside of your current struggle and your current suffering and just be open to what might God be asking you to do or experience for the benefit of somebody else right now. And sometimes that might just be our children. in this current season. And I will say no one is more impacted than your children are. And I will also say that no one gleans more benefit than your children do from your ability to do this and step outside and maybe challenge what you have thought or have felt about this current season. And I just want to make a little caveat here that I know most of us are not openly walking around with this little baggage and title and idea that we are doing something to the detriment of our children. I don't want to give that kind of impression that that's what I'm saying here, because I don't think that's what most of us are doing or thinking or feeling. But subconsciously, we in our struggle have a tendency to be blinded to the experience and the impact on our children. And again, not intentionally, but if you might maybe just be open to the idea that there could be possibly something that you're not seeing from your own child's perspective, and open to how could you see that from their perspective and what could you do better maybe to protect them or to teach them or to help them through this specific season. I was thinking about, again, these things that I've learned, and I will share, I think this might be the first thing that has really been impactful for me as I was reflecting on this, that my parents taught me was to be compassionate and aware of the impact of my decisions on my children. Again, I don't think that my parents would say that they got everything right in this season, and I am not sharing anything in this episode to condemn or judge or to be harsh or critical of either of my parents. I think that I have come to understand, like I said, that, to have a lot of compassion, empathy for them and love for them in where they were at that point in their lives. But I will say that the things that we learned are both pros and cons here. There's blessings and battles is how Nikki Gumbel shared it in my Bible study this last week. He called it the blessings and battles. And I just really love that we sometimes have a tendency to believe that the battles are going on for quite a long time and never ending, and that they shouldn't be present. And that when we're in the blessing season, that is the highlight and where we should be and how life should stay. That's like the good, but that's just not how life goes. And in life coaching, the principle we call it is 50-50. And that's basically what my life coach taught me specifically, is that in the 50-50 is there is going to be good and hard and really amazing and really difficult and everything. And when we can accept that that is how life is, we stop pushing against the battle and stop longing for the blessings, because we can be more present in both seasons and recognize that even in the battle, there is still a blessing. And even in the blessing, there is a battle. So it's both. It's the 50-50. There's equal parts to both of them, and they're equally beautiful in their very different ways. And I think this is something that I learned, like I mentioned, from my life coaching tool, but from my parents, is that I also, before I say this, I would like to just caveat here that none of the things that I'm going to share with you today are meant to be used as tools for you to use for guilt or judgment or shame for any spots you might find in your own journey that you maybe not be doing your very best at. Because the reality is, some things you're doing really amazing at, and some things you're just really struggling to work through, and your children see that. And not to put pressure at all, but hopefully I can maybe give you some encouragement, because I was this child and I did grow up in this very divisive and very conflict heavy divorce. And I will say my parents divorced when I was 4. That was nearly 4 decades ago. And they still have very deep wounds that have not healed. This is also one of the things my parents taught me, that those wounds do impact your children. And when I was growing up, I'm not going to like sugarcoat this at all. And again, I'm not saying this for any judgment or guilt or anything like that, but just the reality from my perspective was this really shaped my identity for most of my even adulthood until I went to therapy and did all kinds of work for myself. But that was something that was really difficult for me as a child. And I will say is a really strong argument for people to say why you should not be divorced. And what research has shown, and I will share, is that children who grow up in safe environments, healthy environments, whether that's with one parent or two parents, a safe, stable, emotionally, physically, mentally, they are the children who thrive. Children who suffer, whether it's in one parent home or two parent homes, are surrounded by unhealthy environments. And that can still be in a two parent household. So if you are married and you have a very unhealthy dynamic, your children do also pick that up. If you are single or divorced and you are building healthy dynamics, and I'm not going to say that any home has 100% healthy dynamics every time, all the time. That's not what I'm trying to imply here. But when there is concerted effort to maintain boundaries and safe spaces, that is where children thrive. I will just say that regardless of my situation, my parents being divorced, in our two-parent home, it was an unhealthy situation in certain ways. And each of my parents took and maintained some of those unhealthy patterns. I will say this was also something my parents taught me, is that I don't really see or think that either of them have truly healed. They have healed some portions of themselves, but not all of themselves. And that pain they have continued to carry with them all of these decades later and is evident in the way that they speak about each other and about their marriage and about their divorce and post-divorce. And that really taught me, like I said, to be aware of my children's experience and how my decisions and my ability to heal impacts my children and their ability to feel safe and like it's in a healthy environment. I will also say that something I learned from watching my parents struggle and through their pain and healing or lack thereof is how important that healing journey is. That part of that pain that I think they each carry is due to their perspective of what their marriage and divorce was like. And this has really struck with me a lot lately and has really impacted me in my perspective of what healing is. And that is that I have learned that true healing requires some self-reflection and self-awareness and ownership and accountability of your own contribution in every relationship, quite honestly. What I have seen and noticed with my parents is that in conversations, I don't see either of them really taking ownership for their contribution. That is a lesson, not just for me to be aware of that, but to also recognize that in my child's eyes, I need to show an accountability for my own decisions and actions and the impact it has on them and acknowledge that to them and apologize to them. And this is something that I have learned to do. I'm not perfect at it. This is something I am learning. Like all things, I don't think there's ever a spot where you get in life that you feel like you've arrived at perfection. But this is a really big one for me because I do see that the impact that this had on my own life and quite honestly, my marriage had a huge impact on that until I started understanding, oh, I have a role here and I have some responsibility. And owning up to that has been a really powerful healing tool for myself, but I think has been a very powerful tool for my children to see that it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be hurting. And it's also okay to acknowledge how we inflict our own hurt and our own pain on ourselves. That, again, I think is a pretty hard lesson and not one that is short, but is very powerful. Something else my parents taught me through their journey is the power of moving forward. Each of my parents dealt with this in very different ways. I think my mom taught me that you can kind of muscle through. It was not common in either of my homes for us to really talk about anything difficult or sit and have a conversation about what has or hasn't happened or what anybody's feelings about it were. But my mom and my dad just did it in very different ways. My mom did it in a very we're just going to make the very best of it and keep moving forward. And my dad kind of did more of a muscle through in a different way of we're just going to power through. I watched them both navigate their post-divorce season. They divorced. My mom was in, I believe, her mid-20s and my dad was in his upper 20s when they divorced, and they had 5 children. So they were still very young. And early on in their careers, my mom went back to school and my dad continued to work odd jobs for most of my childhood. But they did work and provide in very different ways. And both were very impactful for me. So I was able to see, and I think this may be just indicative of how men and women operate a little bit different. And I think it's really beautiful, quite honestly, that we have this ability to be different and achieve similar outcomes, if that makes sense. So while my mom had, the more female kind of nurturing kind of side, and my dad had a typical male, just get through it. We don't need to talk about it. But my mom also had that, we don't need to talk about it kind of attitude. So I'm not saying that's just typical of men, but it just was work. My dad worked a lot and I watched him sacrifice in very different ways than I watched my mom sacrifice. I just think that this lesson of I have very distinct memories of my dad showing me how to make a bed. And it was a little bit military style. My dad never was in the military, but he's very specific and very detailed about everything that he does and organized. And my mom is a little less organized and she's a little more flowy and she's a little less specific about how things go, and she's a little more messy and she's a little more just kind of c'est la vie. And my dad is a little more serious. They both have their playful fun sides. They both have serious and can-do and very hard work ethics, and it just shows up in very different ways. But looking back, I can see that they both taught me very important lessons about work and getting through really hard things. And one of the things my mom used to say was, if someone was willing to pay you $1 million to figure this out, I bet you could. My dad had different kind of sayings, but my mom always had all these little quotes. And that was one of the quotes that really stuck out to me this week as I was kind of struggling and fumbling through what was needed of me this week and what I needed to get done. And this is what really got me thinking about the differences and the similarities of what they taught me, was my mom telling me that frequently. And it really taught me to be a problem solver. It really taught me that I am capable of figuring things out and that I am capable of doing things on my own. And my dad taught me very similar lessons, but just in a different way. Like I said, my mom was a little quote collector and she always had a little saying for everything. And my dad just did. He just worked. Like I said, he worked as an umpire. He worked 12-hour shifts, and we actually didn't see my dad very often. And that was used as, a tool against my dad quite often. And even in my own eyes, I just didn't understand why I couldn't spend time with my dad. So he lived an hour and a half away and we were with my mom all the time. And I got to see my dad usually on holidays and during the summertime. and holidays as in like Thanksgiving or Christmas kind of holidays or spring break, but not very often. And so my dad showed me the power of adversity and overcoming really hard things and our ability as humans to do things that are hard, requiring us to do hard things, because he had to sacrifice his time with us. And as I shared last week, nothing is more important than your time. And when I was a child, I really took that to mean my dad didn't love me or care for me. As an adult, I understand that he was trying to provide for me in the way that he knew how to. And that was by working. And a lot of the times that we didn't get to spend with him was because he literally didn't have money to drive back and forth or something. And I remember one summer I was with him and he had told me that I could make up some pasta for dinner. And I did. And when he'd come home, I had eaten the pasta and he went without eating when he came home because he didn't want to overspend his food budget. So he had a very specific allotment. He was very detailed in his budget and his groceries, and he knew exactly how much he had and he knew how to make it last. And I just remember how I felt knowing that I had ate his portion because I didn't have any self-control and he did have self-control. And so he went without eating that dinner. That just haunted me, that I had eaten my dad's food. So not that like I couldn't have my dad's food, but just that I had eaten his portion. Basically, I'd eaten his serving, and he was so detailed on his budget and his groceries and what he could and could not afford to buy and what he had that he wasn't willing to overextend that. Again, there's like good and bad things there, pros and cons to learn from that, but it taught me a lot about self-control and self-discipline and the impact of overextending yourself or sacrificing when necessary for the benefit of your children. Again, none of these are comprehensive. This isn't a comprehensive list. There's so much to learn from here. I just wanted to share these few lessons. Again, there are so many that I've learned from both of my parents, but I wanted to share how both my parents had really great things to teach me and maybe not so great things to teach me, but eventually I think all things come full circle. And there is a verse that basically says what the devil meant for evil, God can use for his good and his purpose. It just made me realize that God can truly do and make anything enough and sufficient and perfect. And there's going to be things that you, again, are getting amazingly well and things that you're just basically falling short on, like we all are. But it's how we manage and navigate those shortcomings, how we're willing to reflect on them, accept them, acknowledge them, and do something about them that really defines our experience and our children's experience. And as I was preparing this, I just kept thinking of the verse in scripture in 2 Timothy 1:7, where he says, "For God gave us a spirit, not of fear, but of power and love and self-control." This season can be one of fear and discouragement and unknown, confusion, a lot of those things, but those are not from God. Again, there's going to be things that you don't get great, and there's going to be things that you get really good. But when we fall down and we make a mistake, it isn't about vacillating there. It isn't about being stuck there. It's about really being willing to take a step back and allow God to teach you and really show you. Nicky Gumbel explains in his Bible in 1 year that the Holy Spirit will teach you very pointedly and specifically, and the devil is going to make you feel discouraged and despair. And I've talked about dirty pain. That's clean pain and dirty pain. I've really talked about that in our previous episodes, so I'm not going to hash that out right now for the sake of time. But I just wanted to send this reminder that there is clean and dirty pain in this season, and it is what we allow God to show us and teach us and how willing we are to be his clay and let him be the potter and show us and shape us and help us in this journey, because we are impacting our children for life. Like, they only get one childhood, and most of these decisions they have absolutely zero control over, whereas we as adults have a very different story. And not that I think any of you are taking that lightly or don't understand that, but there is a perspective here. Again, just a thought of, I'm learning how to figure this out. And as we're learning, that means we get stuff wrong along the way. And there's that quote of, they say wisdom comes from experience and experience comes from making a lot of bad choices. But give yourself some grace here and allow God to really shape you and use you and show you. Be willing to let him show you where you can kind of fill a gap there for your children. And if for nobody else, he's going to use you the way he needs you to, if you will allow him. But again, I always bring this back to my children because nobody's more impacted than they are. And I do want to share and help everybody else as well. But first and foremost, my children are front and center there. And the same is true for you. And God does give you that spirit of power and love and self-control. And when you lean on that, you're always going to be led along the right path and in the right way. And one more thing, Proverbs is what I want to share as I close up today. And this is what I'm going to leave you with as we're learning about self-control. In Proverbs 1, verse 2, he says, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance, to understand a proverb and a saying. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So allow the fear or respect of the Lord to guide you and to increase your knowledge and your wisdom in him, and to increase your learning and your understanding in this season, so you can bless your children, not just today, but for their entire life. Have a great day, friends. You have been listening to Beyond Believing with Katie Ann. If you have enjoyed any of what you have heard today, if anything I have shared has helped you in any way, please take just a very quick minute to leave me a 5-star review or rating on your podcast platform of choice. I share all of this content with you for free so you can have it. So if you can, in turn, let me know how you have benefited from this. And if you would like to hear me share about a specific tool or struggle you are experiencing in your post-divorce journey as a Christian woman, please contact me. I would love to hear from you. And if you would like to hire me to speak at an event or work with you, please reach out to me at the email in my show notes. Thanks for listening.